Well, hello again, everybody. I'm Jen. I am so excited to be here with Jovan today for his third poetry workshop for us as part of our Brave Days campaign. And thank you for tuning in. Jovan, looking good in your brave gear. I'm gonna
Appreciate it.
turn it I'm gonna turn it over to you. I'm gonna give you full screen and I'm going to sit back, relax, and enjoy the workshop.
Okay. Give me 1 second, y'all. I am missing one little piece that I wanted to work on with y'all today. So give me 1 second to get my organized self together. Where did I put you is the question. Okay. So first of all, again, I hope that y'all are out there in the world, uh, really taking care of yourself, especially um, obviously, your daily self cares, but the enhanced rollout that This Is My Brave is trying to provide for you in celebration of Mental Health Awareness Month. Um, it's what I love about this organization more than anything is you know um, how they're starting to become a part of my daily routine. This is my brave, and if you're not following This Is My Brave social media, you need to, because there's just always content that's coming in, activities that are coming in, and ways for you to not only extend into your own personal journey, but to use your personal journey to connect to others' personal journeys, which I think is one of the most powerful pieces of this organization. That being said, we have been on an adventure as we kind of move forth here every Tuesday here through this writing adventure. And I wanted to just remind us what we're kind of talking about. So we've anchored this design on the cognitive dissonance model, which I think is something that I remember very deeply when I was doing my first therapy sessions. That my therapist at that time had to really remind me of is that, like, Jovan, there's an event, which means that something happens, and then you have thoughts about that event. It means that you tell yourself something, and then those thoughts convert into feelings, and then you feel something, and then those feelings turn into behaviors, and then you do something. And it's really interesting to know about that chain of command, because it's oftentimes that somewhere in that thought stage, you have an opportunity to put a corrective measure in. And that brings us to what I call the cognitive, or what's called the cognitive dissonance model. And really, it's just a very simple little box here that brings us into what happens with our accurate and inaccurate thoughts and how to manage them. So oftentimes we have what's called, what we worked on week one, which is our helpful but inaccurate thoughts, right? And so those ones are really, really hard to kind of um, judge. Sometimes I think about that as like what your spiritual nature is, what type of, belief system do you apply that may not be truthful in the realm of science, but is fully truthful in your realm of spirit. But in that week, we looked at a poem by Rudy Francisco, who's just one of my favorite poets of all time, that was called When People Ask Me How I'm Doing. The reason that is a helpful but inaccurate thought is so often, or why we used that poem for that section, is that so often when people ask us how we're doing, we have a default system of approaches that isn't authentic and honest to ourselves. So while it's helpful that someone asks you how you're doing, you don't always feel like someone's genuinely asking that question, A, and then B, you don't always feel like you are in access to be your full self in those moments. So we use that poem to try to check that thought, to get us to be our helpful, truthful self, which is always our goal of this cognitive dissonance model. Then just last week, we focused into a poet by the name of Carvin's Lasant, right? And Carvin's Lasant brought us into that um, um, unhelpful, untruthful space, which is really, really difficult to figure out how to manage, because when we're in that unhelpful, untruthful space, um, our thoughts can be completely dominated by the exterior world. And I think that it's really important that for all of us, we feel more seen and more heard. You know, my organization that I work with here in Colorado, we have this idea that's called the hearers and the heard, which is the more hearers we create in our society, thus creates the more heard people we have in society, and in tune creates a better energy inside the entire herd that we have in our society. So that's really, really important piece. And Carbons is like, look, I'm going to write a self-eulogy and I'm just going to put it out there for you. And I'm going to use tell them and speak of as these great prefixes to set up these wonderful, wonderful lines of poetry that brought us to this great poem that I hope that y'all got something out of. Now, in our third week, we're going to go to our truthful, unhelpful thoughts. Okay. And I like to call this the I know, but everything's broken section of the cognitive dissonance model, which if you have had the privilege, the benefit to be in therapy, I think that happens so often. I'm aware of what's happening. I know what's going on, but everything's still broken. Nothing's still working. Everything's still there. And that's one of the hardest ones to get out of, because some of these other ones, it's about coming to grips with the situation that's at hand, but you've already came to the grips, but you're still not kind of in that space where you want to be. And so you can still kind of wallow. And when I think about these moments, this is really the moment where we've kind of made a graduation. The graduation is, I know. Okay. And so we got to be able to work with that I know to be able to address but everything's still broken. So to me, one of the ways that I work with that I know is to make an inventory, right? And creating inventory is one of the best parts of life. And, you know, some of y'all who might be into journaling, you've probably been instructed to do this several times. Just make a list, right? But sometimes we forget how these very common practical forms can also become poems, right? So poems can be can be built from letters. Poems can be built from instructions. Poems can be built from directions. Poems can be built out of recipes, right? And in this case today, we're going to build a poem from a list. And, you know, list poetry sometimes is something that is often taught to the youth as a design of poetry. So sometimes we can like look at some of our things like I don't know. I always feel this way when we think about some of the stuff that we work on with kids. We can be in this headspace that's like, oh, that's for kids and that's not for adults. And I think it's a funny headspace to be in, because honestly, when you work with third to fifth graders, the majority of them are already better poets than us, because they don't have this little hater that sits on their shoulder that is telling them that their ideas don't matter, or that they're whack, or that they're not qualified enough, which is what I always tell folks to do, is put up your okay, reach across the shoulder and flick that hater off your shoulder and replace that hater with something that just has your back, that is just alerting you that all of what you're doing is the right thing to be doing. There's no wrong way, and that all of these writing things that you do are never for perfection. They're only for attempts. And if we want to go through our editing process and really sharpen up our attempt to be something more, then we can. But every time we sit down, it's just an attempt. And that's an important piece to keep in mind. So we ask ourselves, well, what's in a letter poem, right? And I kind of created, or in a list poem, and I kind of created this piece here. I'll hold it up for you here for a second, but then I got to read it because on my screen, it actually reads backwards here. So what it says here is that a list poem features an inventory of people, places, things, or ideas organized in a special way. Often the title says what the list is about. It does not necessarily need to include rhythm or rhyme, but each word should be carefully chosen and memorable. Okay, so this is sort of some of our structure work with a list poem, right? This should help us, and I'll keep holding this up there. So some of y'all, if you're watching it right now, can kind of hold on to this. And then also when you're watching it on the playback, you can just push pause and kind of lock this in there for your assignment. Okay. And then here, I'll just kind of put up what the Actually, no, we'll do it in this order. So one thing again to kind of consider, as always, I brought this up in some of my other spaces, is to use your bridge words aggressively. Your bridge words are what I like to call your unfreezers, your unstickers. I don't know if you remember as little kids when you'd play that touch tag. When you play tag, you got to like sit down and somebody has to touch you and then you can get back up. But this is how I feel about with these bridge words, is they really kind of help us unfreeze. And sometimes when we write, we get kind of frozen up. But sometimes if you throw the right bridge word on the back of a line, you'll find yourself in a whole nother world, in a whole nother room, exploring your writing in ways that you never thought that you could do. So I think that's super duper important for everyone. Okay. So um, I don't believe in asking anybody to write things that I don't write, which is a big fundamental principle I think that most instructors should follow. So I did make an attempt at this today. So the writing attempt that I have, I'm calling a working list of things I will keep in my knapsack for the flood. Again, bearing in mind that I'm writing against the powers today of my untruthful, yet accurate thoughts. The I know, but everything's still broken. So here's my working list. 1, my Nana, the feeling of her hands on my neck, her laugh and the way that she made long times shorter. My pencil, no need for eraser, just plow to the next page. My forgiveness, I sometimes forget you in the lint collector. Side note, I just learned on a survival YouTube that dryer lint is actually a great fire starter. Who would have known that my waste could one day be my warmth? My breath. You are the closest thing to a miracle I know, and yet I dispose of you like a snooze button. The pictures of my nephews with their lighthouse smiles. The picture of my sister and me on Christmas when I was 3 with our lighthouse smiles. A montage of finish lines I didn't think I'd break. 2 cups and a long string connected to the ones with the seamstress in their hands. I need some stitches, I think. Somewhere there's a piano in a room on the backside of my darkest darkness. I don't need lessons to know that there's music there. P.S. I think I should have more things, but I still have some swimming to do. So that is my list of things to keep in my knapsack for the flood. And I want to know what your list is. I want to know, what are these things that you're keeping in your knapsack? And these are real things. I'll show you one of my real things. One of my real things is a picture of my nephew that I keep very close to me regularly. So here's the little fella, right? And I got to make sure I go to this often. I go to this often in my knapsack to remind me that, Jovan, you not only do you come from things, that you are the confluence for some other things, and you got to represent and you got to hold it down. And like I said, my Nana is no longer with us, and with my first This Is My Brave performance, I talk heavily about the loss of my Nana and other grandparents and how I keep them with me for these floods. And like I said in there, the montage of finish lines. So many of us, the first thing we forget when we're under trauma siege is how far we've came. And it's important to not just put that into some back room, like I said, some landfill. Don't or make it like it's some snooze button. No. Those are the things that you need to burn bright. And like I said, with the dryer lint, right? I'm a little bit of a YouTube nerd, but the dryer lint can be this wonderful fire starter, and so much of our waste, of our skaith, of our compost, we think is just invaluable, and it can be the thing that's getting us through. So that is our assignment. So let's take a look at our assignment real quick. Okay. So our assignment is to write a list poem aiming at a minimum of 12 lines and title it A Working List of Things Blank. So I had a working list of things to put in my knapsack for the flood, but I want to know what your working list of things is. And that's our assignment for today. And I was also told by a little bird that we might have a poem from one of our previous experiences that I have the opportunity to read to share with you some of the development from these sessions that we've had together. The question that I have to my This Is My Brave crew is, where do I access that if I need it? But again, our assignment here is to write a list poem that is a minimum of 12 lines titled A Working List of Things Blank. Okay, so I have been informed by the wonderful wizards on the backside of this that I do have a poem that is in my phone. So let me pull this up. Oh, cool. Cool. Yeah. So I'm just going to read this, and we're just going to go from here. So this is a poem. I will leave the constructor of this poem anonymous for their anonymity, and we'll read through these couple of creations, it looks like, from our previous class times together. So this one reads, and I hope I'm reading this in the correct order, but it goes like this. From the look in her eyes, I immediately surmise her deepest wish. She asked about me, but it's plain to see this inquiry is truly about her needs. Are you okay? In the blink of an eye, I contemplate and sigh and ponder. Do I tell her the truth or just comply? It's nice rhyming in here. You see, I'm honest to a fault. See, I don't want to be misleading, but it seems after reassurance from me, not a prolonged unpacking of my grief and healing. Yet, she'll never know. The steps I've made toward acceptance through anger, bargaining, regret, and depression, it was the only path available to me, an exhaustingly bleak road as far as I could see. She'll never know that there was no other option. Walk blindly forward as so as not to sink deep from lack of motion. Seek light in a dim reality, not of my choosing. Find breath to fuel the journey to a murky destination. She also could never fathom the hope I've recovered, the glimpse of joy that shimmered and made me wonder, maybe one day I can uncover a new form of being. What is it? I can't discern, but I'm open to discovering. In that sense, I feel that I am on my way, but I'm able to convey all of that today. So instead, I smile and assuredly say, my truth as I know it, with no intention to betray. Yes, my friend, I am okay. So that is a wonderful piece of writing given to us by one of our participants. And that piece of writing really speaks to our very, very first poem, writing in response to Rudy Francisco's When People Ask Me How I'm Doing, right? Which, yes, it's helpful that people are asking you how you're doing, but are they genuinely asking you for it? And are you genuinely giving your honest truth to it? And look at the beauty that happens when you give your honest truth to it, even when you're not doing great, even when things are not perfect. And this poem is so beautiful because it really calls to one of my favorite poetry points, right? That comes from Jericho Brown, which is not about it's not about the about, it's about the journey. And it's like, okay, I could have just said it's okay, but it's not about just being okay. It's about the journey to being okay today. And let me share that with you. Fantastic. I appreciate that so much. And I look forward to our next session to have more things to read as well. So with that in mind, I think we are ready to go write our list poems for this week. So again, the assignment is to construct a list poem that is a minimum of 12 lines with the title of a working list of things that blank. And then we have some, advisory to know that a list poem is an inventory of places, things, or ideas organized in a special way. Okay. Often the title says what the poem is about, and it does not need to rhyme or have rhythm, but carefully choose those words. So my best of luck to y'all on your journey. We will see you next week. And let me tell you about next week, because next week is one of my favorite weeks, because now we've went through the whole lexicon. We went from the, we went through the first step. We went from the inaccurate, the unhelpful, helpful thought, right, with that Rudy Francisco piece. And then we had the unhelpful, untruthful thought with Carvin's Dissonance Tell Them, which means, that piece where we really got to give people the honesty to let us know, like, this, don't get it twisted on who I am. This is who I am. Today we're going to work on our list for our unhelpful but truthful thoughts. The I know, but everything's still broken. And the next week we come together for my favorite week, which is the truthful, helpful thoughts, which is absolutely the centricity of this type of work and the thing that we're trying to graduate ourselves to as we go through this wild life of balancing ourselves inside of our mental health. So I wish you all the best on your writing journey. Please, if you can, make sure that you share to our hashtags. I do need a reminder, though, of these hashtags. We have hashtag This Is My Brave Poetry and hashtag Brave Days. And both of those will get you to a space where we would love to read your work. And, let's make this thing the centricity that we talk about with This Is My Brave, is that when you shed your light and you share your story, that gives a bridge or an opportunity for someone else to do the same. So I wish y'all the absolute best, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one.